3 years ago, I released 2 videos furious over the treatment Funimation had given Dragon Ball Z for its 30th anniversary release and subsequent steelbooks, dangling their perfectly okay masters in front of us in one of the most tone-deaf blog posts I've ever seen, before releasing an astonishingly bad demaster complete with smeary backgrounds and ludicrously blurred line art with a nice insulting dose of fake grain over the top that did nothing to hide the way they'd butchered the base image. Since then, Dragon Ball has continued to see nothing but incompetence from its license holders. In Spain, Selectavision spent months talking up a new remaster they were producing for the original series using materials from Japan, only for that to turn out to be a terrible upscale of the Dragon boxes. It was yet another insulting addition to a long line of horrible home releases for the Dragon Ball franchise. And then, out of nowhere, AB Group in France drops the best remaster the original Dragon Ball anime has ever seen. The colours. Before going through the finer details of this release, I do think it's important to set expectations. This is not a new native scan from a film source such as we've seen from fan groups like Kineko Video. It is another AI upscale of 2004's Japanese Dragon Box. Though unlike Selectavision's efforts, this is an upscale largely done right, and with many features never before seen on an official release. The most obvious and biggest draw is the fact that this has actually been color corrected to an extent. For those of you who may be unaware, film deteriorates over time, and so as the years passed between its original production in the mid-80s through to its rescan in 2004, the colours had degraded from their original look to a mix of terrible tints and ugly colour shifts that not only destroyed the staff's artistic direction, but went a long way in making the show look far older than it really is. Thankfully, AB Group clearly have an awareness of this and have gone through and done a fairly extensive restoration of the colours, white balancing the image and shifting the hues back to a spot that feels faithful to the original material. Eyes are now actually white, skin tones are natural, and there's an increased punchiness to the image thanks to a contrast boost, though that's one aspect I'll touch on in detail later. It's a pretty remarkable effort and was clearly performed by someone with an impressive awareness of what the series is supposed to look like. Research was very clearly done here, with a careful analysis of the original cells performed. Previous attempts in the past, such as Funimation's level sets, although not what I would call bad, were exceptionally muted and grimy and failed to serve as a proper restoration so much as cleanup of an inferior master. As a result, it's actually refreshing to see a keen awareness of Dragon Ball's aesthetic considered here. From reaching out and receiving details about the restoration process, I've come to understand that this was put together in less than 2 months thanks to a last-minute decision not to go with Selectavision's version. As a result, there is evidence that this first set was up against it schedule-wise. Restoring film like this requires intense shot-by-shot white balancing and colour correction, and that's the kind of thing that takes a team of dozens, many months to achieve properly. As expected of AB Group's time frame then, the colour correction isn't perfect. There are shots that aren't totally tint-free. Next episode previews in particular often take a hit, and sometimes colours aren't shifted to the colour they probably should be. But I think what's impressive in spite of this is that I've yet to find a shot where the colours are actually worse. Even when it's not perfect, it's an improvement, and on episodes where things were looking really bad initially thanks to decay-related bleaching, there's clearly been special attention paid there to restore it back to its original form. This is far and away the most competent colour restoration Dragon Ball's received since Q-Tech's efforts in Dragon Ball Kai, and for that reason alone, this set does deserve huge praise. It is a revelation to kick back in front of the TV and witness Dragon Ball's original colour design. It really shows just how timeless the series looks when you fix up that horrendous decay. The clarity. AI upscales are scary. Just the word alone sets off alarm bells in the heads of most video enthusiasts. It is so easy to do it horribly, especially on grainy animated material like this. Constant wiggling, invented black lines on backgrounds, horrible smeariness. There are so many aspects that can obliterate the integrity of the image. An AI doesn't really know what it's looking at, and you have to very carefully train it to produce adequate results. You can't just throw it into something like Topaz Video AI and expect great results, otherwise you'll end up with Selective Vision's incompetent release. It's quite surprising then that this is a pretty damn good upscale job. The uptick in clarity over the original Dragon Box DVD is substantial and extends even into the background detail. The line work is sharp and still showcases the textural quality associated with this era's animation. In some of the most complex shots, it could even pass for a native HD transfer with just how well it's managed to maintain fine detail while enhancing its clarity. It is not without its flaws, and there are definitely some drawbacks here that may turn away those of you who find AI upscaling an objectionable intrusion on the integrity of the original image. In certain scenes there are definitely stability issues, by which I mean you can see finer detail dancing around where the AI has generated a bunch of different results for the individual frames. It causes a sort of jiggling effect when played in motion, and is most clear around text, particularly in the OP, where you can see little white lines flicker around parts of the lyrics. In practice though, especially if you're watching in a regular viewing scenario on a big TV at a standard distance, this effect largely just blends into the natural gate weave of the film, or frame wobble in layman's terms. When combined with the upscale's extremely natural grain addition, it's not something that will break the illusion of the product for most people, I think. You may notice gaps in lines that weren't there originally, you may see the occasional thing jitter around or colour bleed where it didn't before, but ultimately these are all things that commonly occur in cell animation as a medium, and so I think that's one aspect to really keep in mind. Yes, these are flaws that alter what was there originally, but they're flaws that adhere to the medium the show was made in, and so I don't think they stick out in a way that will bother anyone but the most hyper-analytical. Where it definitely does noticeably slump is in its dark detail retention. Due to what I assume must have been a schedule-related choice, this upscale was done from the Dragon Box DVDs themselves rather than the uncompressed master footage. At least that's what it looks like to me when comparing releases. As a result, it means the upscale has had to deal with DVD compression, and in this case, compression means dark detail artifacting and ghosting. To avoid upscaling this flaw in the original DVD and bringing it out in a distracting way, it seems very clear a decision was made to filter those artifacts away and darken those areas to conceal the results. This is partly why there's a boost to the punchiness in the image that I mentioned earlier. That does mean you do lose a degree of detail in dark scenes, particularly those set at night or in clothing of a very dark colour. You'll also sometimes see lighter details vanish, like Krillin's head dots, where the upscale has confused it as a defect to clean up. To me, it's definitely the number one flaw in this release, and something I hope can be rectified in the future by acquiring the master files. It's worth noting that this is an issue born out of a degree of necessity rather than incompetence though, which is certainly refreshing for a flaw in a Dragon Ball home release. With the series set during the day and in brightly lit locations most of the time, it is thankfully not that big of a deal breaker, particularly with the vanishing bright details being fairly minimal. Ultimately, I think if you could put up with the Black Crush in the level set Blu-rays, you can definitely handle some of the loss found here. Either way, I do of course hope that AB Group can acquire the master files going forwards to just mitigate this issue in the first place. I have to say, in spite of these issues, I definitely don't find myself with any major complaints in a regular viewing environment. With improved grain and a huge jump in line clarity, it's an upscale that respects the medium of its source and provides major gains for contemporary televisions with very little cost to the integrity of the original video. While I completely recognise and respect the arguments against AI, and am of course not ignorant to the many flaws that come with this, it's definitely my opinion that this is a perfectly good, if not great upscale that will appease a vast majority of viewers. The audio. Perhaps the biggest surprise and draw for this release is its Japanese audio track. I released a video 5 years ago talking about how, contrary to popular belief, Dragon Ball's audio quality in Japanese isn't super low quality because of its age, but because Toei threw away their master materials and fell back on a lower quality substitute. I mentioned how fans had managed to collect high quality recordings of this series for Z, but knowledge of the original Dragon Ball series audio was completely up in the air, and either way, Toei had said they just weren't interested in using it. Now, sometime after I released that video, the entirety of the original Dragon Ball's anime audio was found and shared online, and now, all these years later, that high quality audio has found its way onto an official release right here. It cannot be overstated just how big of a moment this is for Dragon Ball. To have that high quality audio out there in the public and in a way you can legally purchase is huge. You cannot walk that back now, and it's something fans can rightfully point to as a necessity for upcoming releases. No more muffle, no more noise, all that's left is clarity and a small bit of buzzing during certain sounds that you'll probably not hear without headphones. It's a huge step up, and best of all, it is synced correctly to the video, where the original Dragon Box was actually very famously out of sync in the first place. If you've never experienced Dragon Ball with high quality audio before, it is a revelation and you will not be able to go back. Final thoughts? It's quite surreal to be able to talk about a Dragon Ball home release and confidently say, you know what, that's pretty good, and really mean it. It's been 10 years since I could say that for Z, and for the original Dragon Ball, arguably 20, maybe 10 if I'm being very generous. And ultimately, none of those positives really apply by today's standards. Once again, this is a release that legitimately appeases hardcore fans. It provides color correction that understands the original aesthetic of the show, it's upscale, understands what cell animation should look like, and it includes the holy grail of Dragon Ball audio. This is so clearly a release by fans, for fans, and I really do encourage you to pick it up. I'm sure many of you are wondering how you can actually do that and whether it's of any use to you in its current state. Unfortunately, being a French release, there are no English subtitles or an English audio track, and it is locked to Region B, meaning it won't work if you're outside of the countries listed for that region and don't have a Region 3 Blu-ray player. So here's what I'd encourage you to do. Crunchyroll now holds the rights for Dragon Ball in an overwhelming number of countries. Tweet at them as loudly as you can, bring up the color work and audio, help them understand what makes this release so special and why an English language release is so essential. Emphasize the price point. This is 68 episodes for only $75. It hits all the right beats for the consumer, and to me, it's a real no-brainer. This is the best release the series has ever seen, and it deserves to be distributed in more than just a single country. I hope you've enjoyed this brief analysis. I hope you're as excited about this release as I am. And of course, if you'd like to stay updated, please do feel free to follow me on Twitter. That's where I'm most active these days. But either way, let's try and get news of this release spread around as much as possible. So please do rate the video and leave a comment, as it always helps. Share it around online, post on forums, post on Twitter. And other than that, I will see you when I see you. Oh, and just a heads up, if I see a single comment that's like, oh, I prefer the old colours, oh, they're so vintage, give it such a retro vibe, I will turn up at your house and piss in your eyes. Okay, bye.